I wanted to make a more like comprehensive video about my eating disorder experience. So I've deleted the last three because I feel like they kind of um, gloss over the other part of my eating disorder, the part that I still have a little trouble talking about because I still get embarrassed by it. And I used to be more embarrassed and ashamed of it, but then I realized it was a lot more common than I thought, and it was totally normal. So now I talk about it more openly. So yeah, I'm making this like completely comprehensive video. Hopefully it'll be more interesting than the last ones. I'm not gonna put in like three parts. I don't think that's necessary anymore. Um, so yeah, basically I there were signs that I was predisposed for an eating disorder, like starting when I was little. Um, for instance, anorexia and anxiety tend to go hand in hand, and I was a very anxious child. Um, I had a lot of social anxiety. I was pretty terrified of meeting new people. I remember one time, I think it was like second grade. My old best friend from the past 2 years and I were like separated, so basically we didn't see each other throughout the entire school day. And I remember finding that out on the first day of school and crying hysterically on the playground. Like it was that bad, and being like inconsolable for the first month of school. Yeah, and I remember being worried about things that a normal child wouldn't worry about, and I would have these like compulsions to like I was really obsessed with symmetry. Like if my right hand touched something, my left hand had to touch it very soon after in the same exact way, or I'd get kind of freaked out. I would avoid certain numbers. I liked patterns. I liked structure. I like hated the way certain clothes felt. Stuff like and like certain the way certain foods tasted, like stuff like that. Like I was just anxious and I was kind of a difficult child. And I was also very shy. And I kind of snapped out of that when I entered middle school, which for my school district is sixth grade. I became much more socially adept. I made friends really quickly, but also lost them really quickly. Um, I was starting to do better in school and realize what I was good at, and I was basically coming out of my shell. But I was also like, I think I still am. I'm the type of person who gets easily influenced by other people and ideas and like I don't know, the media and stuff, I suppose. And I don't remember any specific thing kind of triggering the idea that I was fat, but I do remember wanting to be white and associating whiteness with thinness, because they're kind of conflated in the media. Like you look up any magazine, and the first few models you'll see will be like females, female-bodied people who are probably white and probably very very skinny. So I remember kind of being ashamed of certain body parts that didn't like fit that that mold, and yeah, I remember going to the doctor one year and expressing concerns that I was fat. And I remember her gossiping to a nurse about me and being like, oh my god, like I have this patient who's like 11 or 12 and she thinks she's fat and she's totally normal. I don't know why she thinks she's fat. And I remember hearing that and being like, oh, okay, well, if my nurse and my doctor don't think I'm fat, I must not be fat. Like, that's the kind of person I was. I was basically a sponge. Like, I would just absorb a lot of outside ideas. And the ones that sounded most realistic were the ones I would indoctrinate. So I believed my doctor, thank God. Otherwise, I might have gotten my eating disorder right then and there. But I was protected from it for like a few more years, and then when I was in high school, my eating troubles began. Like I'm not sure exactly when they began. It must have been like sophomore year. Like I wanted to get better at track and cross country, and I kind of assumed that you'd have to restrict in order to do that, but I would just get like bad injuries and what's basically called the female athlete triad. So I stopped doing that. But then the summer after my junior year, I was restricting more heavily and basically falling into a pattern of disordered eating that spiraled into like restrictive anorexia. I remember that was the first half of my junior year, fall 2000, senior year, yeah, senior year, fall 2011. I was so depressed and I didn't talk to anybody. I was very resentful of my family members and my friends. I was really suspicious. I kind of just wanted to be completely alone all the time. So my friends stopped contacting me. I stopped reaching out to them. People on the cross country team kind of avoided me because I was kind of like a freak at this point. Like I wouldn't eat with them. All I would talk about was like food, and all I would think about was food. Um, I was very mean because your body like is not gonna when you're starving, you're not gonna waste energy like being nice to people. Like all your body wants to do is find food. and that was totally what happened to me. So it was a very depressing and like isolating part of my life, and also a very angry part of my life. But then I was forced into treatment in January 2012, and for the first month or two, like, things were fine. I was a typical anorexic, like, model patient, talked in group therapy, talked in individual, admitted when I was afraid of food, admitted when I was having a troubling day, really worked hard. And then something happened, I don't know what, I just started to binge more and more often, and I would hide food and kind of steal food both from school and the treatment center, which I had never done before, and I had never considered myself a thief. So kind of like my morals and my self-image kind of turned on its head, and I remember being so ashamed of admitting that I was doing this, and also being ashamed of like how rapidly I was gaining weight. Like, I entered treatment when I was underweight, and I kind of went right, I went like straight past my healthy weight range, and my weight didn't come back down to that range for a while. um, and I remember my therapist being really concerned and weighing me multiple times a week, but like, and basically making it really obvious that there was a problem, and with like my physical appearance, but not really telling me how to fix it. And I don't think they ever said the words binge eating like in a sentence to me ever. So I had no idea what was going on. I thought I was a freak. The other girls, like, they noticed the physical changes, but they were actually like very nice about it. They never said anything. Um, it was actually the therapists who were worse, because they were like, "Oh, she's eating, like, she must be better." And my insurance actually kicked me out because they didn't question why my weight gained so quickly. They were just like, "Oh, she's eating again. Goodbye." Like, treatment's over. And my therapist kind of agreed, which was such a slap in the face. Like, I remember being so ashamed and feeling like a complete pariah, and no one really knew what to do with me. They were just like, "Oh, you know you have a problem. You know your body's like not gonna be able to keep up with this." And I was like, "Yes, tell me how to fix this. What can I do?" Um, so yeah, that was my biggest problem with treatment. Like, they just didn't know what to do with people whose eating disorder symptoms changed. But that actually does happen a lot. Like, I looked it up after I left that center, and it turns out a lot of people don't just stay in a rigid like set of symptoms. Like, we think of eating disorders as categories, but it's probably more helpful to think of them as a continuum, with restriction on one end, binge eating on the other, and purging kind of like falling along in between, and other behaviors falling in between. Because people tend to kind of slide back and forth between symptoms and diagnoses. And like, I don't know, I think a lot of treatment providers think of it as like, okay, she check off this box, this box, this box, checked off all the boxes, this person has this disorder, done. But that's not really how it works. Like, I think the current statistic is that 50% of anorexics eventually become bulimic. And that's quite a high number. That's very like statistically significant, it's clinically significant. Like, it happens. Eating disorders aren't static. They're very like fluid illnesses, and when you go into recovery, like, it might change. It might be like, okay, so now we can't do this. Let's, for example, we can't do this method of purging because they'll catch us. Like, switch to some other behavior, and sometimes you don't even notice. Like, I didn't notice. It was very slow. But then all of a sudden, like about a month in, I was like binge eating every single day, and it just kind of snowballed from there. It actually became worse than my anorexia did, because I was so depressed, and depression and binge eating kind of feed into each other, no pun intended. And because like it was so stigmatized. It's like, oh, how could you be a binge eater now? You were an anorexic for such a long time. Um, but that happens. Like, people's bodies get tired. If you restrict for a really long period of time, it's eventually just going to rebel, and you might binge eat. It happens. And I didn't realize how common it was until I started outpatient. And I definitely should have started outpatient therapy earlier than I did. But I remember waking up like every single day for like 3 years and being like, "Oh, this is the day. I can do it myself. I don't need help." Because I was so embarrassed by what had happened with me and the therapist, like at the treatment center, that I was afraid of getting professional help again. I thought I would be like a laughing stock. But like, keep trying. Like, if you keep trying to find a therapist who knows what they're doing, like, it will really pay off. It will make your life so much better. Like, I no longer binge or restrict, and my therapist and I get along great, and she understands. She knows that it's really a common thing for people's symptoms to change. And now binge eating disorder is recognized in the DSM-5, and everyone knows that it's the most common eating disorder. Well, I shouldn't say everyone knows, but it is the most common eating disorder by far. And like, yeah, it's really great that it was recognized, but it sucked that it took so long, and it sucked that there's still so much shame associated with it. When really it's just the other side. Like, if you think of like restricting as like a coin, like it's just the other side of that coin. Like, they're not all that different. It's not impossible to go from one to the other. Um, and I know it's kind of strange because like people are like, oh, anorexics are like this and this. They're like anxious and like competitive and etc. And like bulimics are like impulsive and like outgoing and this and this. But it's not so black and white. Like, eating disorders and the factors that contribute to it aren't so black and white. Like, a lot of people are both impulsive and perfectionistic. Like, I am. That's probably why I got both like disorders. Actually, I'm not sure if I met the criteria for binge eating disorder, but I did binge eat a lot for a long time. Um, so yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's common. So if you're someone who struggles from multiple multiple symptoms of eating disorders, if your eating disorder doesn't fit a neat little box, if your eating disorder is considered like subclinical, if your eating disorder is in a category like OSFED, like the people just don't know what else to call it, like that's okay. That doesn't mean that you don't have an eating disorder. That doesn't mean that you don't have an unhealthy relationship with food, and it doesn't mean there aren't people out there who are going to turn you away or not know what to do with you. Like, you might have to try harder. I had to try harder, but in the end, it's so worth it to just keep trying and find someone who will fit you and who will help you tackle all of your symptoms instead of someone who will kind of sweep some under the rug and only work on some symptoms and behaviors. And it is really hard. Binge eating is stigmatized for sure, more so than like restricting, I think. But just know that it's really common. It doesn't make you a freak. A lot of people do switch back and forth, whether that's like restricting for some days, binging or purging for other days, doing both like every day, or having a long extended period of restriction followed by a long extended period of binging or purging or like whatever other behaviors there are. Like, that happens a lot. I think it's actually a lot more common than just fitting a strict like set of symptoms for your entire duration of illness. And I feel like we should talk about it more. I know it would have helped a lot if I had known that people tend to binge eat after they restrict for a long period of time. Um, so yeah, don't make people feel like freaks. If you feel ashamed of your eating disorder, know that you're not alone. Know that it will get better if you get treated, and if you kind of accept that it is happening to you, but it has also happened to people before you, and they've gotten better. Yeah. So I could have saved myself 3 years of extra struggling, but at the same time, at least I'm better now. Um, yeah, so that's my story with anorexia and binge eating. It's still hard to talk about binge eating, but and how I like did that for such a long time, but it's getting easier. Um, People aren't like as shitty about it as they used to be, so yeah, and I'm not beating myself up about it anymore. So, yeah, that's it. That is the whole story. That's the first time I've shared my whole story. So I hope you liked it, and I hope you know that you're worth it no matter what your symptoms are, no matter what your behaviors look like, no matter what you look like. Like, if you're struggling, you deserve to recover. So yeah, I'll see you next time.